can you tell me what is the mission of diverse educators?
So, diverse educators, our mission is all about like connecting people so that they are feeling part of a community, so they can then collaborate with that sense of belonging. And that community kind of like commitment is all about how we celebrate the success stories of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because quite often it becomes a deficit mindset and we're critiquing everything that's wrong. And there's lots of things that's wrong, and there's lots of things that's missing, but we need to be celebrating and leading with some of the positive affirmation, some of the impact. And it's also about amplifying the lived experience and the diverse voices of the system, because you tend to end up having the same people being asked to speak at events or speak in articles or represent the Department for Education. And I say that sort of like very aware of the fact that I'm a straight white woman. So I'm very mindful of the fact that I get asked to speak at events about diversity, and I'll look at the lineup and there's no one diverse,
Mm.
visibly diverse. And I'll say, am I the best person to be speaking at this event? Because if you've got a pledge to diversity, where is the visible diversity of your lineup?
Mhm.
So that's the kind of the nuts and bolts of who we are and what we do.
What is the story of how it came into the existence?
Okay, so I need to take you back a little bit further before Diverse Ed was born. So, 5, 6 years ago, I was one of the 7 women leaders who co-founded Women Ed. And Women Ed is a grassroots gender equality network. We're global. We've got in excess of like 35,000 people, different country footprints, and the second book's just been published. So, a very successful grassroots network. Off the back of that success, BAME Ed then launched, LGBT Ed then launched, and Disability Ed then launched. So you've got 4 networks for like you could call them affinity groups. That if you have lived experience or if you're an ally for that particular characteristic, you have those spaces to go to. The events tend to be for free and they tend to be on a Saturday. However, if you have an intersectional identity, you then need to go to multiple events. So as a head teacher, my deputy head came to me one day and said, "Han, it's ridiculous. I can't keep going to events every Saturday." And I was quite matter of fact. I said, "Well, don't go." And she said, "But I'm a woman. I'm a BAME woman. I'm a bisexual BAME woman, and I've got a hearing impediment, so I need to go to all 4. Can't we have one event, one conversation about diversity, equity, inclusion holistically about the whole person rather than about a quarter of my identity?" So we had this, so it kind of sowed a seed with me, and I went away and thought about it. And I just put out, we're going to have a diversity event at our school. And everything was quite London centric, South centric at this point, and our school was in Oxfordshire, and there wasn't really stuff going on in the middle of the country. I know it's southeast, but it's getting to the middle of the country. So we had this event 4 Januaries ago, and 250 people came. We had people from Leeds, from Wales, from Kent driving to our school to be part of this conversation, and the energy was just amazing. So then every January for 4 years, we hosted this event. A couple of hundred people would come. In the middle of all that, I left headship and Benny, my deputy head, moved schools. So we then were having an event with no host. So a friend of mine who's a CEO in Slough offered to host us. We were due to go up to Liverpool in June for our first event in the north, and SupplyWell were going to be one of our sponsors. And obviously, then with COVID and lockdown, that couldn't happen. But because of George Floyd's murder and the increased focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, we pledged to flip the event into a virtual event. So we had our first virtual event in June, and 13,500 people came.
Wow.
So if you think normally a couple of hundred come, just the reach that we had because of it being remote and virtual during lockdown and people having a heightened awareness to diversity, equity, inclusion, particularly anti-racism. So since June, we've just gone to a whole different scale and reach because there's more interest. So we've had a virtual event in October and a virtual event in January. And in the meanwhile, I went out to some of our former partners who have then sponsored the website, and the website's now live. And that's a
Brilliant.
resource for schools. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind in the last, it's not even a year, in the last sort of 6 to 7 months, that, that just with what's going on in the world and what's going on in society and the school system, it seemed like the right time to actually launch the website.
So, how can educators get involved?
So there's lots of ways to get involved. I mean, you can follow us on Twitter, DiverseEd2020. You can follow our hashtag on all social media, hashtag DiverseEd. Remember the camel case, capital D, capital E. So if people with disability are accessing it, their voice
Oh,
activation
yes,
software
yeah.
can help them. We have our website. We promise not to spam you. If you sign up for our newsletter, it's a monthly newsletter. It goes out on the second Wednesday of every month, and all opportunities are in the newsletter. We have a blog that we put out every couple of days, and we've got some very diverse voices sharing their lived experience and the work they're doing in schools. And then we have a series of events. So our annual event has now become a quarterly event. So we have an event every term. We're pledging to do one north, one south, and one in the Midlands, and then one remote one every year. So removing some of those geographical and physical barriers. And we've just got a book deal. So we are in the process of curating 110 contributors to Diverse Educators the Manifesto, which will be published in January 2022.
What's on the horizon? Diverse ed and for yourself too.
Well, it's exciting. Like there's a lot of collaborations coming up. So things on the horizon or things that work that started but it's now a bit more visible, I can amplify it. We are having a quarterly diversity roundtable. So we've had 3, and that is 60 to 70 strategic leaders across the system from different organisations coming together to think about how we can be more coherent and more cohesive with our agenda. And we're in the process of writing a letter to the government about their statutory responsibility for committing to this work. So that's quite a powerful piece of work. We have got a diversity and governance piece of work going on. So I host a webcast every month, and our 4th one is this Thursday. And we have got 4 amazingly experienced, diverse governors sharing the work they do. And then we've also got a piece of work going on around ITTE and working with the national organisations for initial teacher training to look at how we can diversify the recruitment, the teaching, the mentoring, the curriculum for our entry level teachers. So like I'm trying to not do anything else new for the time being because it's quite last year there was so
Yeah,
much innovation and newness. We need all of those things to embed and sustain and for the foundations to be really strong so that the work can then grow and develop from it.
fantastic. So it's LGBTQ plus History Month during February, isn't it? So what can teachers do to highlight this in the classrooms?
So there's so much going on. Like if you're not on Twitter, please get on Twitter because there's so much sharing and generosity and free resources on Twitter. You can find them not on Twitter, but you have to spend a lot longer trying to find them. So I put out a tweet last week to say what's everyone doing for LGBTQ plus School History Month, and I had like 30 things put into this thread. So I've now got a blog coming out this week picking out 10 things you can do. So some things that definitely go onto the website. So Sue Sanders, who founded the month, their website's amazing. Just go to LGBTQ plus month website, and on it they've got links to all the free resources from the Pride Trust, for example. We put out in our newsletter that diversity role models have what's the word I'm looking for? Like they've made all their resources free for this month, and there's some amazing diversity role model testimonials and case studies in there. Place to Be are doing some interesting work around mental health and well-being and the intersect between that and sexuality or sexual orientation. And on our website, we've got blogs from some teachers who have talked about their journey coming out or how their well-being has been or needs to be supported by the system. So there's lots out there. I think just kind of like reach out, have a look, and whether you like to listen or read or watch, there's different resources you can access.
It's also Children's Mental Health Week. What can schools do to get involved?
So similarly, I put out a tweet about what's everyone doing for that. So Place to Be are the founding organisation. Their website is an absolute treasure trove. Again, they've got loads of free activities. They've got their art rooms gone virtual, and they've got virtual art activities you can do at home, parents and carers with children as part of like art therapy at home, which is lovely. Um, there's lots of free activities. There was an assembly from Princess Kate on Monday morning, which you could access. So again, Google it, go onto Twitter. There's lots of blogs being shared with, here are 10 things you can do this week. And the theme this year is Express Yourself, which links nicely to DEI. And I know some schools on Friday are doing a Dress to Express Yourself day. So the kids are going in and revealing parts of their identity. And a lot of schools are doing screen-free learning on Wednesday, where they are committed to doing no devices on Wednesday to think about the impact of technology on our mental health and well-being as well.
So we've already touched on this, but what do you do to promote wellbeing in schools?
So, for me, like, there's a lot of promotion of wellbeing in schools, but what's the practical solutions? What we're actually doing about it? So, as a head teacher, we were one of the first schools in Oxfordshire to get the Gold Mental Health in Schools Award. So, if you're not aware of that award, please look at the Carnegie Education website, Mental Health Award. I'm one of the coaches on that, and I think that's a really good framework for a school to look at that self-evaluation process and that critical scrutiny of what we're doing well, but where are our gaps. So that's one thing to have a look at. As part of my work with Ho Education, I host a fortnightly webinar and forum for mental health and wellbeing, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I alternate, so it's all free. We've got amazing speakers. So far for mental health and wellbeing, we had Kelly Hannigan talking about whole school approaches, Buki Youssef talking about Teacher 5 a Day, and Lucinda Powell talking about how to support parents and carers with their own mental health and wellbeing, or how to support parents and carers in supporting their young people's mental health and wellbeing. And we record all the sessions and they're there as a free resource. So please do have a look and sign up and come and join us at that.
So heads up of support to the head teachers, or what do you think about the pressures faced by school leaders?
So HeadsUp is a growing network that are one of our partners at Diverse Ed, and we're one of their partners. And I think if you look at how many adverts are out there right now for head teachers, I think it says quite a lot about the system. We had a recruitment, retention, attrition issue for head teachers anyway, but the impact that COVID and lockdown and just the government's lack of strategy, shall we say, has
Yeah.
had on the system in the last 8, 9 months. I mean, I think all school leaders are under pressure, but head teachers are taking the brunt of it.
Mm.
And Heads Up creates that safe space, that peer support network, to have that network of places to go to actually share the load and to talk about the what's working, what's not working with people who a empathize, but b there's a lot of compassion and support there as well.
What kinds of challenges do you think supply teachers face, and what can we do to help them?
See, supply teachers at the moment are interesting, aren't they? Because it's tricky being a supply teacher during lockdown. Because I know I've heard lots of stories about schools breaking contracts or not committing to contracts and work for supply teachers. So there's a lot of supply teachers who are out of work at the moment, who are leaning into other things like tutoring. So I think thinking creatively as schools about how we can look after the supply teachers, particularly when we've got a kind of a longer term commitment to them, and thinking about how we can deploy them within our schools is key. And I think for supply teachers themselves, it's about how they can stay resilient, but also how they can be innovative in carving out that pathway for themselves. And thinking about how they can add value and have impact. Because I would imagine that some are feeling quite superfluous at the moment and quite sort of listless and quite purposeless, and actually thinking about what their USP is and how they can add value to the school system still might be a starting point.
So, if you were to deliver a parting message for everyone watching, what would it be?
So please be an inclusive ally. If every single person committed to speaking out and standing up for inequities in society and in the school system, then our schools would be much safer places for everybody to come to school and be their whole self. And I think if we think about belonging and how we create belonging for our young people in our schools, please can we make sure that we are creating belonging for all of our adults in our staff bodies as well.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much, Hannah. That was a lovely little chat.